Now, as technology transforms the world, it also creates new tools that change education, such as tailored online courses to provide access to premium universities. These new ideas, however, need funding to become a reality. They also need to be user-friendly and accessible for students. So how can investors, entrepreneurs, and those putting the ideas into practice collaborate to effectively use technology to make change in a meaningful manner? We'll now introduce our speakers. They are Mr. Alvin Gralen, China President of HTC, Mr. Gareth Stockdale, CEO of Microbit, and Mr. Stephen D. Smith, Executive Director of the USC Shoah Foundation. Moderating for us for this panel will be Ms. Isabella Steger, Senior Reporter at Quartz. Welcome.
Thank you for joining our panel today on the intersection of technology and education. We have a very varied and interesting set of speakers here to talk about their experience in this space from three very different perspectives. So first of all, we have Alvin Gralen. He's the China president of HTC Vive. That's the VR headset business of HTC, which you might better know as a smartphone company. He's based in Beijing, and he has a long career in startups and venture capital, and he said that he's been in tech since he was age 8. And next to him, we have Gareth Stockdale. He's the CEO of Microbit. And you can actually play with the Microbit, which is outside on one of the booths. And it's a handheld, programmable microcomputer that helps kids learn how to code in schools literally across the world, from Finland to Iceland to Sri Lanka. And I think in Hong Kong, more than 200 schools are using the Microbit right now. Gareth is a big rugby fan, and he's looking for a way to get to the Rugby World Cup in Japan next year if anybody has a way of getting him a ticket. And Stephen Smith joins us from LA. He's the executive director of the Shoah Foundation at the University of Southern California. He produced a VR film recently called The Last Goodbye, an award-winning film that takes you on an immersive VR experience into a Nazi concentration camp with a Holocaust survivor. He is also providing education on genocides that have happened around the world in the last century, and he's a theologian by training, so we expect very deep and meaningful conversations about the meaning of life and other things. And this panel is particularly interesting, I think, because the shape of classrooms has surely changed a lot from when you or I were in school. So we've had interactive whiteboards since then, but I think we're far past that stage now. You know, we have VR headsets and kids are learning to code. So I would love to get the perspective of these three educators on what the classrooms of today and the future might look like. And to begin with, we have three presentations from them, just giving an overview of their different ventures. And I believe that, Alvin, yours is first.
Great. Good afternoon. I know you guys must be a little bit tired from lunch, so I'm going to try to wake you up. I actually have mostly just videos. There's a few little videos to get everybody started. If we can put the slides up, please. So what separates us from all the other animals in the world is actually our ability to learn and then to pass on that learning. And that's the reason that we've actually been able to create the dominant position that we are today in this earth. So it's very fortunate that today we're gathering so many people to teach, to learn how to teach and how to use technology to teach, because we're in a very fortunate time where technology is now at a place where we can learn in a very different way than when we grew up. Current educational models haven't changed for over 100 years, but over the next 10 or 20 years, it's going to be completely different. So I just want to give you a few examples of what's happening today with virtual reality and other things that will help make our educational system much more effective in the near future. So here's a group of students who are using new ways of learning through actual activity. As we all know, what makes people learn is when they're interested in something. When they can actually go and participate and be immersed in an environment, whether it's underwater or in space or playing with chemistry and atoms, they will learn better, right? And this technology allows kids on a small group or on a large scale to be able to have a field trip at every class. I remember when I was a kid, going on a field trip was a thing that I always looked forward to. And when you put on a headset, you can have a field trip to Mars, or you can have a field trip to the size of an atom. That was not possible in the past. In fact, we've done some tests recently that showed a class using VR headsets that supplemented education, another class that used traditional education with the same teacher. And what we found that at the end of the course, the best student in the traditional class did not as well as the worst student in the VR supplemented class. Now, the topic was on astrophysics, so it wasn't a very simple topic, but the fact that a cross-sectional group was able to show that level of difference, it's amazing that this technology isn't being used more. We just showed an example of children's education, but what's also as important, if not more important, is lifelong learning, as what Dr. Agrawal said this morning. Can we turn on a little bit of sound? A little audio, please.
In order to make VR simulations affordable for even more
so
companies,
this is,
we are happy to announce support for the new
this is Volkswagen using VR headsets to help train their entire workforce. They're planning to train 10,000 people in their business this year using our technology to help them have a better assembly line and better design processes. You know, companies like auto companies, airplane companies, and real estate companies are actually having between 2 to 10x increase in efficiency in terms of getting a product out to market using VR for their primary design methods. Now, we talked about more STEM education and more vocational education, but one of the things that everybody wanted to do, I think one of the astronauts was saying that he wanted to be in the World Cup. We've actually invested in a company like this, which is using VR to train professional athletes. In fact, we use this to work with the Ministry of Sports in China, where, as most of you probably know, the Chinese soccer team does not do very well, but they should. So they're getting the youth team to utilize this technology to help train them on soccer strategy. And what we also did a side-by-side test of a 3-month program using essentially already the elite young athletes in the sport. And we found that there was a 7-time increase in efficiency in terms of learning for strategy for the people who are using VR to train versus the ones that use traditional training methods with the same coaching team. So I grew up in the family of artists. My dad was an art professor for 20 years. And I never really liked art in the sense of I didn't understand it. But if I was able to be exposed to art like this is the River Qingming Festival painting. It's a 10-meter long painting that is one of the most famous paintings in Chinese history. Before, most people would be very kind of intimidated by looking at a painting like this, and they wouldn't know how to understand it. But we've turned it into a VR application. In fact, this VR application is in the demo area outside. You guys can go and try it. And you can go and interact with every single person in that painting and understand what it's like to have lived several hundred years ago. So here's an example. My mom was actually one of the founders of the Guangzhou and the Shanghai Ballet School, but I never learned how to dance. So if I had this application a long time ago, I'd probably be a much better dancer. You can actually use VR not just to teach knowledge, but actually to teach skills. So using something like this where you can actually use your entire body and use that full body learning, that's where the potential of VR is. So no matter what you want to learn, whether it's skills or knowledge or something that is very hard to understand, very conceptual, VR can help you. And particularly if you combine that with AI, where you can create customized coaches that will make a special personalized lesson based on your ability to learn and what topics you're good at. We're very, very fortunate to be living in a time when all this technology is available. And I really hope that all of you guys take this back with you and think about how to apply all the technology that are being shown today by me and some of the other speakers, and be able to actually take it and do pilots and be able to do it much broadly. China is actually one of the countries in the world where it is now actually officially a degree program to learn VR, right? Asia is one of the places where education is super prioritized. And if you take this back, take this knowledge back, take this kind of model back to wherever you're from, I think it would help your also local markets to develop and thrive much faster. So thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. I'm going to move to the front of the stage because I found it quite off-putting that Alvin was standing behind me, and I will try not to fall off the front. So I'm Gareth Stockdale. I'm from the Microbit Educational Foundation, and we're a not-for-profit, and our main aim is to broaden participation in digital creativity and coding. We think that computational thinking, coding are fundamental foundation skills for the 21st century. And we want more people to be able to do it, especially girls, and especially those from underrepresented groups. The Microbit project started life in the UK when the BBC brought together a partnership of 39 partners. 29 partners. They were difficult enough to manage. I didn't need 39. And we brought them together and we created the Microbit. And we gave away 1 million Microbits to every 11 and 12-year-old in the UK. That is a picture of a Microbit, and the results were great. 70% of girls who used the Microbit said it made them more likely to take computing as an option in future. 90% of children who used the Microbit said that it showed them that anyone can code, and it made teachers feel like they had improved their practice. We're now a global organization. We went from that project in the UK, and we're now available to buy in over 50 countries. And we have national rollouts and programs in countries as far and different as Uruguay, Canada, Croatia, Denmark, and many, many more. And as Isabella said, we've got 200 schools in Hong Kong using the Microbit. So one of the key things when we were designing the Microbit was that we wanted it to have a really sort of low barrier to entry. So you can start programming the Microbit using Scratch from an early age, one of the most popular coding languages in the world. But that low barrier to entry is all about being able to code from beginner to getting something onto your Microbit within 3 minutes. And here we can see, obviously, I'm live coding on the desk and talking, so multitasking, but you can do that in sort of 3 minutes. We wanted to take the physical and the digital and marry them, make a movement into the classroom and allow people to create, follow their passions and create solutions to real-world problems. And that's what the Microbit is all about. So as you can see, I've done a little animation on my Microbit, and here is a Microbit, one I prepared earlier. So as I said, the Microbit is a small microcontroller. It has a low floor, but it also has a high ceiling. So you can move from blocks to JavaScript. There is also a Python editor, and as you can see here, we are coding the same flashing heart, but using Python. The Microbit also has a bunch of sensors on it. So it has an accelerometer, it has a thermometer, it has a compass, it can sense light, it has a edge connector, which you can place into other devices, and also put crocodile clips or banana plugs in to extend your experience. And that sort of high ceiling is key to allowing children to take their first steps, but then to continue their journey into other areas. Our key age group for the Microbit is 8 to 12 years old, but we have younger using Scratch, and older it's even used in some university undergraduate course. The third-year computing course at Oxford University is using Microbit to do their third-year projects on. And finally, with the Microbit, there's also radio and Bluetooth. So you can do Microbit to Microbit communications, and also you can code it using your mobile phone or your iPad, or you can control your mobile phone with your Microbit. And when you're doing that radio Microbit to Microbit communication, it opens up possibilities around IoT and smart home. So here's a little demo that I prepared earlier. So which obviously has turned off in my pocket, which is always good. So that is not working. Right, we will leave that live demo. That's always what happens with live demos. So that's not working. But yes, so that ability to extend your learning is really important. Most of the microbit hardware is open source, so there are over 120 accessories which you can then use to extend that learning even further. We also have a bunch of free resources, free teacher resources. All the software editors are free to use. And as you use the microbit coding environment, you can use the simulator and then you download the code onto your microbit. So we believe that the coding and computational thinking are key fundamental skills of the 21st century. We think that physical computing using devices like the microbit is a key way of getting more kids interested, providing context and for solving problems in their lives. And we think the microbit is a great tool to do that. We've got a stall outside if you'd like to come and see us later, and if you'd like a free microbit to take away and explore your own digital creativity, then please do. So I'm just going to finish off with a short video with some teachers and some kids talking about what the microbit means to them. So if you can play the video, please. Or not play the video.
Live demos.
Are you able to play my video?
We hear a lot about the need to support our students with being innovative and creative. And yet, most of the ways and tools we use and that we have access to don't really foster that type of learning. With the microbit, we're able to nurture that true innovation.
This is the traffic light sensor that we have made. It's to prevent traffic accidents involving pedestrians to happen.
If there are more young people learning to code, then there will be more creative problem solvers at the technology and computing table in the future.
Good afternoon. As Isabella told you a few moments ago, I am a theologian by training, and I'm about to do a demonstration of high technology. So let's pray this works. So good afternoon. 25 years ago, filmmaker Steven Spielberg was making a movie called Schindler's List. It was about the Holocaust, and on the set, a number of Holocaust survivors came to talk to him, and he realized that every single one of them had a story to tell. So after making the movie, he made a foundation. It was called today called the USC Shoah Foundation. 55,000 testimonies were collected in over 60 countries in 42 languages. Now of genocides from all across the world, in fact 9 genocides from across the world. It's an archive of humanity. Today I want to talk about how we get closer to the story of humanity through education. I want to bring up the screen there, who's right behind me. I'd like to introduce you to Pinchas Gutter. Hello. There we go. Hello.
Hello.
What's your name?
And my name is Pinchas Gutter, and I've come here to listen to some of your questions. I believe you have some questions.
Where were you born? Where were you born?
Just repeat that.
Where were you born?
I was born in Łódź, in Poland.
And how old are you?
I was born in 1932.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had a twin sister.
What was your sister's name?
My twin sister, she had two names. Basically, she had a Hebrew name and she had the name that we called her all the time. So the name that she was known by everybody was called Sabina. But she also had a Hebrew name called Shifra Trana. Shifra also comes from the Bible. And she was one of the midwives that watched Moses when he was floating along the Nile. And they saved him, and they were the ones who, didn't observe the edict of Pharaoh to throw all the man-child into the river. So Shifra, there were two of them, Shifra and Pua, and her name, the first name was Shifra. And Trana, I don't know what it means.
What happened to your sister?
My parents and my sister were murdered in the gas chambers of my death.
So just to explain what you're seeing here, you're not seeing an avatar, you're seeing the actual story of Pinchas Gutta as told by Pinchas Gutta. It's a form of oral history. But what we did, we asked him over 1,000 questions about his life. We filmed him in 360, so in fact we can play this back holographically or in virtual reality or in augmented reality. And the idea is that students take their own journey with him and explore his life with their own curiosity, the questions that they want to ask. Because what we found out is when you teach about the Holocaust in history, students don't ask the question following that saying, oh, can you just remind me, was it the 13th or 14th of May that your family were deported? What they ask is questions like, do you hate the Germans?
What I think about the Germans today is different what I felt about the Germans soon after the war. Because for many, many years, I felt very actually fearful. That was actually a kind of, I was scared of anything to do with Germany. It was almost as if repulsed. I was repulsed, that's the right word. I was repulsed because I felt that this nation that did all that terrible thing, to my community, to my parents, to all the Jewish people that they murdered and what they, terrorized and tortured. So I couldn't have any track with them. And I really tried, I felt repulsed and I felt that they were ugly.
It's just like real life. Sometimes you get short answers and sometimes you get long answers. This is going to be a rather long one. I'll ask you one final question. Do you have hope for the future?
I always feel hope. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a pessimist about personal things because of my emotions and fears. That I'm always scared about what might happen here, there, and everywhere. But by and large, about everything else, I'm very hopeful. If I wasn't hopeful, I wouldn't be talking to you or anybody else about my experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentations. Just going to ask a broad question open to any of the three of you. Obviously, we're not trying to create people who are good at using VR or the future software engineers of Silicon Valley. What are some of the softer skills that you think that using this kind of hardware in classrooms can teach kids? Anyone?
So when we did the project in the UK, we did 11 immersion sessions around schools. And what we found was that, doing project-based learning and taking the microbit and creating solutions to problems helped with collaboration, helped with problem solving, and helped with communication and team building. So it isn't just about coding, it's using coding as a facilitator to build those teams and build those solutions.
Alvin?
I think a lot of people have said that VR is an empathy machine, right? And the reason that people say that is because it allows you to step into the foot or the shoes of the person that you're trying to get the feeling for, right? So I think there's been a lot of studies that show during certain crisis situations, if you are able to put a donor into the camp of some kind of a disaster, they will then understand the feelings of those people, of those families, after a certain, whatever famine or tsunami or anything, and that understanding will allow them to donate more and to be able to understand what it's like to be the other person. I think that can be used for this kind of situation. It can also be used for gender biases or racial biases. There's police that are now being trained so that they see what it's like to be a young black youth, and how when the police is aggressive to them, how they would react personally. So there's a lot of soft skills that can be taught when you can give people a different perspective.
And Stephen, speaking of empathy, that's obviously a very big reason why you've decided to use VR in your educational materials. When did you think of starting to use VR, and how do you think it has changed the way that people learn about the Holocaust and other genocides?
Well, I think we tend to sometimes we mix up sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is often an emotional reaction to seeing somebody else suffering. Empathy is a skill, and you need to learn the skills of listening, of developing questions, of developing the critical thinking skills as well that go with understanding what another human being has gone through. The visual really helps with that, because it can take you into that place. And you can't suffer or experience exactly what that person went through, but what it enables you to do is to start to use that skill set to understand it more deeply. And we've found that teaching these extreme examples of human experience has become much easier when we've been able to close that gap.
And on a more practical level, how do we make sure that schools and students don't get left behind? How do we know that all children can have access to these VR headsets or microbits? And maybe this is a question more relevant for Alvin and...
right now we actually have a very specific program targeted towards education and making education accessible and affordable for schools of all sizes, and whether you're private or not. We have solutions that allow non-technical teachers to be able to create VR content using something as simple as making PowerPoint, allowing them to share that information between teachers and between classes. There's devices that are just a few $100s per device, and it can be shared across multiple students. So it's not any more expensive than what tablets or laptops that are being used today in current classrooms. So cost shouldn't be the factor. Mm-hmm. And I think what's maybe even more interesting is that a lot of this technology will become part of people's homes, and maybe it will allow any student who can have access to a particular device to be able to access the best teachers in the world. One of the most limited resources we have on this earth is good teachers. And if you can put on a headset and be in a classroom in Stanford or Harvard or MIT or Tsinghua, we don't have to use the current testing methods that are filtering out all the students and making them inaccessible to these talented teachers who can influence them and turn them into the potential that they have. Right? So I think that's the value of technology. It makes access to better teachers more accessible.
We have a question from the audience, but it's also one that I had, and I think it's very relevant. Now we see stories about how some university professors don't want people to use laptops to take notes in lecture halls because they feel that it's detracting from the human-to-human experience of being in a lecture hall with a professor. People are checking their messages, not really listening. Is there a danger to being over-reliant on using technology in classrooms and taking away that important interaction between the teacher and student?
I think there is always a danger of that, but I think for me, technology needs to, as Alvin was saying, it needs to be used correctly. It needs to have effective systems and teacher training put in place so that it adds to what the teacher's doing rather than replaces them. And we, with the microbit, for example, are using it to take it away from the screen so that you're doing it with your friends and with your teacher.
I think one of the things we have to always look at is what are the learning outcomes we want, and in what way does technology enhance those learning outcomes, and what way might it detract from it? And I think that goes not only to what the practice is in the classroom, it's also when we're building our systems or our platforms, the same thing applies. The project I just showed you right now, when we sat at the beginning of that, we said, okay, this is not a technology project. And so we started by saying, okay, what does it mean to do this in conversation? No technology. What does it mean if we then take that to flashcards? What happens if we do that in audio? And then eventually the the rationale was ultimately, by adding on the layers of technology, you would always have a no-tech, a mid-tech, and a high-tech version of the same thing, but the content would always be there.
And I think, sorry, just to add to that, I think that sometimes hardware and technology is used as a sort of panacea to cure all ills. And I think that is wrong. I think it's about, as Stephen said, and as Alvin said, it's about a well-designed program using technology rather than technology for technology's sake.
Stephen, I have a question about one of the reasons that I believe you made this project was because the more time elapses from events like the Holocaust, the fewer people obviously alive to tell these stories. We also live in an environment now with a lot of misinformation floating around. So I want to ask you, what's your hope for this project, and how do you think you can better educate people about these events?
Well, there are lots of thoughts about how the ethics of this work, first of all. When you're telling a human story, we need to make sure that human story is genuine, because, of course, it can very easily be replicated in this digital age. Actually, it's why our project doesn't use avatars. We actually decided to use video so that we are actually clear about what the source of the material is. We are living in an age right now which is ever-changing and ever-moving. And one of the things that we want to be able to try and do as we collect these types of stories is say, everybody has a story to tell. That story forms a part of the world. Right now, we curate that on all sorts of social media channels. What we really want to do is try and create an authentic voice that we can go to that can give us guidance in these times. Because actually, between us, we have the knowledge, we have the wisdom. Sometimes we don't know where to find it.
So the upsides and downsides of technology. We're running out of time, so I might just ask the panelists to say what they envisage the classroom of the future to look like if they could design it very quickly.
I think the classroom of the future, in my ideal classroom, is not current classroom. It's a classroom where you can put on a headset and be with a group of students from anywhere in the world and being taught by the world-renowned expert in that particular topic, where you've been transported to that place or that environment of the topic that you're being taught, and you're learning the way that we are intended to learn as humans. Right, to use our full body, our full mind, and to be able to use all our senses in our learning, and to be able to have the most broad bandwidth method to take in information. And I think that's going to be something that will be possible in the very near future.
Okay.
I think it's about redesigning our classrooms so that they are based on project-based learning and acquiring skills rather than acquiring knowledge. I also think technology needs to be integrated more into every subject. The microbit is great when it's taken out of the computer lab and it's used in science and PE and art. And I think I'd like more of that. I'd like more of that integration so technology becomes a facilitator for all subjects, not just for computing.
I think that education is about nurturing. If you think about education as its most instinctual, it's about rearing a child and making that child ready for the world. The world is now a much smaller place. We're much more globalized. So I think what I would imagine and like to see in the future is keeping that nurturing, keeping that connection, that human connection real, really true, and then supporting that with the technology that enables that to occur in the life of the young person so that they can become a part of the world and act in it wisely.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this panel. Please give a round of applause to our speakers.